Thank you, Your Excellency, for receiving us in the consulate of Portugal in Ho Chi Minh City in Nam Việt, Việt Nam. We just have a few questions for you, so please just answer naturally.
Sure.
So recently, in 2015, Vietnam and Portugal celebrated the 500 years anniversary of bilateral trade between Portugal and Vietnam. Can you tell us a little bit more about the relations between Vietnam and Portugal?
Sure. It was not just a celebration of bilateral trade. It was, I think, perhaps more of a celebration of friendship and connection, and only secondarily trade. People to trade, they need to respect each other, they need to perhaps, even in some businesses, they need to be friends, and only then they can actually trade and do business together. So the celebration in 2015 and also the celebration that will occur next year in 2020, it's a reflection of that. It's a reflection of what is the friendship and what is the relationship between the Portuguese population and the Vietnamese population.
For 2020, to celebrate the 505th year anniversary of the relations, what do you have planned activities and events for the consulate for the Vietnamese people?
So basically we planned one event every single month. So in January we'll open the celebration with a conference on which a Portuguese historian specialized in 16th century history, and especially Asian and especially Vietnamese history. And you will be together with the Vietnamese historian, which is an expert on Vietnamese history of the 16th century, and both will give their views of what was going on in Portugal and in Vietnam at that time, and how the first points of contact between Portuguese and Vietnamese happened, where, what was done.
Portugal is known internationally, and especially now, for its football superstars. But yet, it's quite unknown in Vietnam. Could you let us know more about your country, demographics, economics, position in Europe?
Well, I have to disagree with the fact, with what we just said, that Portugal is only known for football in Vietnam, or almost only known for football in Vietnam. That is not correct. It is not correct since about 4 or 5 years ago. One is investments from Vietnamese in Portugal. The second one is tourism from Vietnamese to Portugal. Today there are 500 passengers every single month that take an airplane in Vietnam with a final destination, Portugal. And the third sector is education. We do receive quite a lot of Vietnamese students for higher education, master's degrees and also bachelor degrees in Portugal.
How many Portuguese live outside of Portugal?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. That's a very good question that not many people ask. So Portugal in total has 15 million citizens. 5 million live outside. Some Vietnamese friends, they ask me, well, if they live outside is because the country is not good. Well, it's wrong. No, it's the reason we like to live outside is because we started traveling more than 500 years ago. It means that my grandfather was a traveler. So, of course, all of us have this inborn willingness to travel and to live abroad. We tend to arrive to a country that we know very little about, and we tend to adapt very rapidly to the local culture.
So what role does Portugal play in Europe currently?
Well, it's actually, we play a very important role inside of the European Union. Many times we are asked to mediate disputes, to be the referee in the middle of 2 or 3 or 4 countries that who cannot reach an agreement. And the reason for that, I think, is because the Portuguese tend to speak other languages, other foreign languages. So, for example, I mean, we are having this conversation in English, but we can also have the same conversation in French or in Spanish. So number one, languages, and number two, the fact that we started traveling many years ago, and we know exactly what disputes are. So we know how to solve them. That's the role Portugal at the present moment plays inside of the European Union, which is a very important role.
Portugal held legislative elections this October 6th. Could you explain the stability of the institutions in your country?
So the system is extremely stable. Our laws tend to change very, very little. If we are committed into a program or a decision, we tend to stay committed in that decision for a very long time. I think your question, it's perhaps related with the fact that Vietnamese, they want to invest in Portugal, or they want to start a company in Portugal, and so they are afraid of what about if the law changes, because they may have this image of other countries like United States, for example, on which things can change quite drastically depending on the administration, but that's wrong. I mean, Portugal, historically speaking, once we are engaged in a strategic decision, we tend to follow that path for many decades.
Portugal had undergone massive economic and social reforms under the International Monetary Fund's watch and has been largely credited by the IMF for its successful economic reforms. Why entrepreneurs should invest in Portugal now?
Today, Portugal, economically speaking, is a very stable country. But perhaps the best indicator in Portugal, the best indicator of the economy in Portugal is the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate today is below 7%. Below 7%, it means the unemployment is zero. So what do Vietnamese investors will find if they invest in Portugal, if they start a business in Portugal? Number one, they will find a very clear, rules and regulations. It's most things, it's straightforward. Number two, they will find that the law says that they are not foreigners. In other words, in many countries, when you are investing as a foreigner into that country, the law that applies to you is slightly different from the local law. In Portugal, we never had that. Historically, the law that applies to you, Vietnamese citizen that invest in Portugal, and the law that applies to me, Portuguese citizen born in Portugal, is exactly the same. We treat you exactly in the same way. Number three, they will find a thriving business community, especially in some sectors. I mean, the IT sector, tech sector, it's booming in Portugal. Major US corporations, they are coming to Portugal. They are in Portugal. I mean, Google, the largest office they have in the whole EU is actually in Lisbon. So there are many business opportunities for Vietnamese entrepreneurs in Portugal.
Great, which leads to, in October 2012, Portugal launched a new residency program for foreign investors called the Portugal Golden Visa Program. To date, thousands of investors and their families have been granted permanent residency. Please tell us more about the Portugal Golden Visa Program.
Sure. Yes, that program was launched in October 2012. The first investor from Vietnam that received the Portuguese resident card was in late 2013. Can't remember the month exactly. And then in 2014, a few more. And then 2015, it took off. So today, that program is actually quite successful in Vietnam. There are more than... I think there are close to 300, I don't remember anymore the exact number, but 300 investors plus their families. And so there's about 1,200, 1,300 Vietnamese who have a Portuguese resident card. So the feedback from that program is very positive, economically speaking, for the Portuguese government, and also for the Vietnamese population, because they can access a European Union country with the rules of the European Union and learn what is being done in the EU. So it's very successful.
Going back to the consulate now, what services does the consulate provide to Vietnamese citizens?
The same we provide to Portuguese citizens. It's exactly the same. Remember, it's the same law for everybody. The two main services that Vietnamese they request are notarial services, so the certification of documents, for example. And the second one is civil registration. In other words, the starting of the naturalization and the request for citizenship application. So those type of services, they can be done here.
Is there any message you would like to leave for our Vietnamese audience today?
Sure, go to Portugal, travel, take an airplane, just go on vacations, a week, 2 weeks, just go and see by yourself, and you will find out that the Portuguese population is very friendly, that we are not racist, that we speak English, that is very safe, the weather is excellent, and then if you have a business opportunity, by all means invest. The government is here to support in whatever way we can, but go there, visit.
Thank you for watching this video. To watch more videos, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook, including sharing this video. Thank you.